Welcome. I'm Julie Bacon, and you're listening to the Mindset Coaching for Handlers podcast, a podcast for dog handlers who are on a mission to achieve big goals. Here I share lessons, insights, personal stories, and tools you can apply during your next show, trial, or test to help you strengthen your mental game and hopefully cue more consistently. Be sure to check out the show notes where you'll find details about the episodes, plus important links, including the link to the Dogged Planner and Workbook created just for handlers on a mission. So if you're ready to improve your competitive mindset, get out of your own way, and connect with your dog like never before, then it's time to get comfy, bring an open mind, and work your mindset. Hey there, welcome back to the podcast. All right, this week we're going to try to get in a habit of pushing ourselves on a regular basis, right? It is really easy to just live in our nice little comfort zones, which, we've decorated so cutely and are so fun to be in. And, that concept when we talk about running our comfortable shoe, right? That dog that is just so effortless to run, regardless again of the ring, maybe it's effortless in agility or rally or obedience or draft or whatever is your chosen sport. And it is addictive because that comfort zone is lovely and it's pleasant and it's predictable and good things happen there. And so, it's really tempting just to kind of stay there. And I see this happening with people who have what I'll call a mature dog, a made dog, who's they've done all the learnings. They're 6, right? Because there's that adage that you don't really get it together till they're 6 and you always think it's going to be faster. And then gosh darn it, it's their 6th birthday and it clicks, right? So let's just go with that adage for a moment. So let's say they're 6, they've turned that corner, they're comfortable, maybe they've achieved some really great goals, even some lifetime goals that you had set for them already. And it's just so lovely. And I think that part of what makes it lovely is, you put in effort, you get success back, you get results back, you get something back, basically, right? As opposed to, and I'm going to absolutely, just blow this up just for grins, but as opposed to a young dog where you put in all the effort and they just don't give you the joy back, right? Because they're going to give it to you in 5 more years or whatever. Or you're getting that joy actually from your older dogs, not necessarily from the younger dogs that are causing you much frustration, right? And of course, like I said, I'm, overstating it just for grins. But I think that it's really easy to want to stay in that comfort zone and keep running those dogs that we know so well, or stay in the classes or in the venues or even in the sports that we know so well, instead of pushing ourselves. So today I am going to try to make the argument that you not only push yourself once in a while, but that you are always finding ways to push yourself. And maybe, not every class, or maybe not every trial, or maybe not every weekend, but at least maybe in classes, or maybe one class out of the weekend, or, maybe you are just constantly looking for ways where you can level up. Because let's face it, we want to keep getting better, right? That's why you listen to this podcast. That's why you go to classes and seminars and do all the things and work your dog and all that, because we want to keep getting better. And as we get better as handlers, presumably the next dog gets a little easier, though the universe does have a 6th sense of humor and gives us the dog that we think we need and pushes us to get our skills and our abilities up even further, right? So we know that happens. But in the meantime, I'm going to make a case for pushing ourselves outside of that comfort zone and into what we call a growth zone. And remember, here we have a growth mindset. We embrace the growth mindset. We believe that, with effort, we can improve, right? And so how much we can improve might depend on our effort, might depend on the dog, might depend on our own skills, might depend on other variables, but with effort, we can improve. So if we push ourselves and make a little extra effort, there's a lot that we can learn just by trying. And remember, trying might include failing, right? It might include falling short. It might include not cueing for several weekends in a row or something because you are pushing yourself. But we are always learning when we are willing to do that, and we're willing to step up, and we're willing to step up into that growth zone and push ourselves. All right. So I made a random list of it, and it ended up being 7 things. It's not 5, it's not 3, it's not 10, it's 7. I don't know why, but anyway, here we go. So one of the first things is, by pushing yourself, you really will uncover, discover, evolve your true potential, right? You're going to keep pushing yourself and revealing what it is that you can do. And I think really you're always going to be surprising yourselves. I mean, I think we hold ourselves back a little bit too much, but when we push ourselves beyond what we know, beyond what's familiar, we start to uncover different strengths, different abilities that we may not have known that we had, or may not have known our dogs are capable of, or may not known we're capable of. And I think this is true like in a seminar environment, right? You go to a seminar and you're like, oh, I can't do that. But you try, right? You make the effort, you try, you enjoy having someone come in and give you a different perspective, or when your instructor pushes you to do something harder and you find out that like, oh my gosh, I can do that. And when we find that out, we boost not only our own confidence, but often our dog's confidence. And then that bond in between us that we're like, oh, look at us, we can do that. This is pretty cool, right? So again, that way that we surprise ourselves in the best of ways. The second thing on my list is we build resilience, because it will absolutely fail at times, right? Pushing ourselves into our growth zone is not always going to be like rainbows and Skittles and unicorns and all of that. You know, we are absolutely going to fail. Some things we are going to absolutely fall on our face about, okay? But we need to also learn that skill of resilience and overcoming and getting back in there. And our dogs need to learn resilience, and they need to learn how to make a mistake and it not be the end of the world, and that they learn how to recover and they learn how to bounce back. And we learn how to do that together, because maybe we have a dog who needs a little support in bouncing back. And so when we learn that we kind of live through it, right? That it doesn't kill us. In fact, that we can tackle a new challenge, fail, which is always failure. And this podcast is always in air quotes, because there are no failures. There's only lessons. But we get that feedback and we realize that like, okay, that wasn't the end of the world. Maybe didn't go the way I had planned, but at least I pushed myself and I learned something. And then I learned that I can kind of come back from a setback. And that's even a second learning, right? So resilience, as we know, I am very passionate about teaching resilience, and that is a massive skill that all handlers need, because it is not a straight line out there, folks, between like, oh, I think I'll try, and look at me, successful, right? There's a few bumps in between. So resilience is important. The third thing on my list is, of course, our dogs. Hello, deepening the bond that we have in our dogs, improving our relationship. You know, anytime we try something, that we work through something, we teach our dogs something, they teach us, you know, we get the feedback, we figure out how they're learning and how we're teaching, and that adage of like, you know, we teach them and then they show us what they've learned. And sometimes those don't match, right? It's beautiful when they match, but sometimes they don't match. So we're always creating a deeper understanding, a deeper level of trust, deeper teamwork. And who doesn't want that, right? So just from the act of doing something and trying and pushing together, you are going to get that, you know, that, I don't know, it's just that great bond, right? That just gets stronger and stronger over time and experiences, all right? And of course, the dog knowing that we will always be there for them no matter what. And they for us too, right? It all makes it stronger. The fourth thing on my list is, of course, learning from mistakes, right? We're going to try, we're going to fall short. We're going to try and we don't really quite do it right. So we make a mistake. So that's why failure is always in air quotes for me, because it's not really a failure, because you got something out of it. You learned a lesson, or you learned a new skill, or you learned that your timing wasn't quite right, or you learned that, you know, you need to be faster, or in agility, like you're always late. We're always late, aren't we? So that you learn that you can get there faster, or you need to be there faster, right? So when we also take that added step of writing it down, journaling some feedback, you know, analyzing it a little bit about what we did and what we didn't didn't work and what did work and trying something different and tweaking, that's when we really get to level up even faster, right? We accelerate our learning when we take the time to analyze it, not just keep throwing spaghetti at the wall, hoping and praying that something will stick. No, actually, we want to be a little more analytical about that, a little more deliberate in our training and in our feedback and in capturing that feedback and understanding that anytime we fail, make a mistake, make an error, that it just is an opportunity for us to get feedback, which just leads to more growth, which leads to more improvement and actually faster improvement if we're willing to really look at it. Okay. So 4th was learning from our mistakes or shortfalls. All right. 5th is obvious, expanding our skills, right? There's a lot of things that we will try at home that we don't always feel comfortable doing in a trial environment. I get that. You get partway through your run and you're like, oh my God, I'm queuing. This is great. And so we don't really want to try some things sometimes. But when we push ourselves, even in a trial environment, especially at home, of course, we are always expanding our skill set. And isn't that what we want? And even something that we can do well now, like what if there were a different way? What if there were a better way? I mean, I think that's the beauty of seminars, right? To expose us to the constantly evolving teaching aspects of dog sports, right? There's always a new trainer, a new philosophy, another way to look at something. And by opening ourselves up to that and remaining open to it, then we are more likely to try different things. And that makes us more versatile. It makes us more effective. It makes us sharper. The skills that we do have are sharper. And it gives us more options when we get in the ring and something happens and we need to make a change, or we haven't seen something happen before. But since we've been pushing ourselves, we're like, oh, I know what to do if this comes up. I know what to do in this case or that case. So expanding our skills is an obvious outcome of pushing ourselves into that growth zone. 6th is, increasing our motivation and our own engagement, right? We've been talking a lot about motivation the last couple of weeks. I'm talking about it all month in the membership. And, motivation is a feeling. It comes, goes. You can't always count on it, but when we push ourselves and we put these new goals in front of us, even these little micro goals, right? You want to try something different in the obedience ring. You want to try a different skill in the agility ring, whatever it is, you just want to try it for one run maybe. You think it's a small thing, but it actually has a big effect on your motivation and how engaged you are in that run. Because suddenly you're like, oh, this is going to be cool. I'm going to put this X skill there and this is going to be great. This is a perfect place to work on this. This is great. I love it. Even me talking through that, there's a different energy, right? There's more motivation, there's more engagement, there's more interest. So whether you're doing it in training or whether you're doing it in the ring, you are increasing the motivation to try and to level up through that engagement. It's hooking you in a way, right? So it keeps it fresh, it keeps it exciting. You're working on something new. You're not just running out in the backyard in a training session and doing the same 5 things all the time. You're like, oh, I saw this thing, I read this thing, I want to try this thing. And that is automatically more interesting, okay? Last but not least is you're inspiring not just yourself, but other people, because your willingness to try, your willingness to be the handler that is always stepping out and pushing themselves, that does not go unnoticed by your peers in your class, by, people at a trial, maybe, maybe there's other people who watch and see you and what have you. And so it is lovely when our own actions, which probably are for ourselves, right? We're taking these actions for ourselves to improve our own handling, to improve our own growth and our own journey. But how lovely when it ends up inspiring someone else to do the same. And, there's conversations around the ring that happen. Maybe you have a conversation after your run. Someone says, how was your run? And you're like, well, there were a few bobbles, but I'm really pushing myself to try this new thing this weekend. And so I'm really happy that I did. Someone else is going to lean forward. Oh, really? What are you trying? What are you doing? What else? And our journey is we just lift each other up, right? So if we can keep inspiring others, keep inspiring ourselves, it all gets better for the whole community. All right. So those are my 7 ways that or 7 things I should say, that we learn when we just try and we get out of our growth zone, discovering our potential, some more potential, building our resilience, of course, deepening our bond with our dog, learning from our mistakes, expanding our skills, increasing our motivation and our engagement, and inspiring others. And when we come back in a minute, I'm going to talk about how we make these things into a habit, right? Because it's great if you do it once, but it's a whole lot better if you're doing it on a regular basis. Quick question. Did you ever wish you had more mindset help? Well, the Q membership was created just for that reason. Every month we pick a topic, and then we have 4 lessons, which are kind of like these podcasts, that we dive deeper into. And so if you are ready for more, you're ready for more mindset work, think about joining the Q membership. Annual members get a free coaching session, but you can also choose the monthly option as well. Go to theqcoach.com to learn more. Let's get back to the episode. All right, like we said, it is better if we are always pushing ourselves, right? And now I'm not saying that like every run you do, you have to like find 5 new things that you're doing. No, that becomes a little overwhelming. But if we can on a regular basis be very conscious of the fact that when we are in our comfort zone and when we are in our growth zone, that becomes really important. Like that awareness. I always start with awareness, right? Start with your awareness. Am I in my comfort zone right now? Am I in my growth zone? Am I, just going to class like I do every Tuesday night, like normal, like no big deal. It's the same thing. It's been the same thing for 5 years. I've been going to this class, I like this class. It's a great class, blah, 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 blah. Or are you showing up at class, that same class that you've been going to for 5 years, but you're like, hey, I've got 2 things I really want to work on tonight in class. Well, even that is just a little bit of a push, right? It's not just showing up at class and just giving your brain over to your instructor and letting your instructor decide how everything's going to go that evening. No, you can show up and maybe even email them ahead of time and say like, hey, I'm trying to work on this. Can we do a little extra of that or what have you? And by the way, most likely your instructors are going to be thrilled for the feedback because as an instructor, like we want the feedback. So go ahead. So when we want to create pushing ourselves as a habit, all right, it doesn't mean we're pushing ourselves into our risk zone, right? So on the model, that is a very kind of common model, I guess. You have your comfort zone followed by your growth zone, followed by a risk zone. And risk being there's a high risk of failure or maybe a low risk of reward. And it's just riskier, right? Like my simple example is, 1 year my dog wasn't quite ready to start doing agility, but it was my national specialty. And I threw him in the ring because why not? What the heck? Let's just see. It's my national. There was a very high risk of failure for that, right? And he did fail, right? We NQ'd, I don't even remember what different ways, but I went in there with the right attitude, knowing that that was probably going to happen. So my goals and my mindset were fine. But in terms of like outcome, super high risk, right? So that's just one easy example of what risk could be, okay? So when we want to push ourselves, though, into our growth zone, and, there is a fear threshold that we cross when we go from our comfort zone to our growth zone. So we have to learn to push past that. And there's a certain amount of uncomfortableness that we have to be comfortable with. We have to be comfortable being uncomfortable and doing that on a regular basis. And knowing that, for instance, if we get kind of nerves just walking into a seminar in a building or a location that we've never been before, and in like that little instant where you kind of want to run and pretend you weren't there and you're like, oh my God, I can't do it. But to like that part where you like sit down and set yourself up, and you settle in for that seminar and you're like, okay, I'm here. This is great. I'm going to push myself. I'm a little terrified, but this is going to be good. That's kind of the feeling, right? In the best of ways, that's kind of the feeling. So when we talk about making it a habit, here are some things that will help you, and only 5 things. Here's like 5 ideas to help you I'm going to say infuse that kind of growth mindset or that concept of pushing yourself as a habit. All right. So the first thing is set some stretch goals, right? Even if you are in a comfortable place, what else can you be doing? How can you push this a little harder? Let's say you've, been doing novice obedience for years and it's pretty much the same thing. Maybe instead of just being happy that you escape with a Q for in 3 Qs and your title for your national club, maybe you push yourself and you're like, I want all of my scores over 185 or something, right? And you figure out how to set little stretch goals for yourself, or you put that CD on your dog when they're younger, like this next dog when they're younger or something. In agility, if you're always doing the regular classes, maybe you throw in a premier or a games class that, and maybe just doing the idea of doing fast makes you completely uncomfortable because you don't want to set your own course. That'd be a good place to push then, right? So just little stretch goals. They don't have to be ginormous. They can be, but they don't have to be. Because again, we're trying to build a habit. And by building a habit, we want to push ourselves a little bit, find some success, get some confidence so that we want to push ourselves again. If we are pushing ourselves too hard or too far, like i.e. into the risk zone, then we're going to fail too often and we are going to get frustrated and want to just like beat our head against the wall or not try and go running back to our comfort zone. All right. I talked about this ages ago on a podcast, but it was something I heard from an Olympic athlete, and she was talking to her trainer and she was really frustrated, and she was just like, couldn't get this new thing or whatever. And she was super frustrated. And her trainer, her coach said back to her, he said, you know what? A third of your training should be happy. It should be enjoyable. A third of your training should be pushing and hard and like kind of frustrating. And then a third of it should be like neutral. Like there's neither plus or minus, it just is, right? And so I always think about this when I go back to us pushing ourselves or leveling up or moving into a new place, is that we don't want too much frustration, because if that third becomes unbalanced, right? If we're, let's say 60, 70% in our frustrated pushing zone, we'll want to give up. We'll get too frustrated. But also if it's 70% is joy and ease, then we're probably not pushing enough, i.e. we're probably back in that comfort zone. Does that make sense? All right. So the second one is to embrace this growth mindset, right? Embrace it. Remind yourself that, nothing new happens in your comfort zone, right? Your comfort zone is by nature familiar and tried and true and sort of old, And so if you want to keep pushing yourself, that's where the action is. It's in your growth mindset, in this belief, this knowing that with effort, we improve. The third thing is to reflect, journal, look back and make adjustments, try something new, look back. How was the experience? How did it work out? What did you learn? What would you change? Were you so close, give yourself a little feedback, because the feedback also is helpful in measuring progress over time. All right. The fourth thing on my list is seek feedback. Ask for help, ask for someone to watch you, ask for someone to video you, ask your coach to push you, ask your trainer, whomever, to give you a little feedback, and ask for it the way you want it. And by that, I mean, is don't just walk up to someone and say, what did you think? Okay? Because it's really loaded. And how do they respond? Are they supposed to respond emotionally? Or are they supposed to respond logically? How do you want them to respond? So instead, if you want someone's feedback, be like, hey, I've been working on, I'm going to use something from agility. I've been working on my blind crosses. I'm going to go do a blind cross in here. Will you watch me and see how's my timing? Well, now the person knows what they're looking for. They know what feedback you want, and they can be helpful. So now you run, and they were like, hey, it looked good. Maybe you were a hair late, because isn't that what they always say about our blind crosses? You were a hair late, but your dog read it really well. Maybe next time turn your head first, and that will help cue your dog, because they're really looking for the side of your face or whatever. Okay. So when we need and desire feedback, we also need to give a little bit of instruction about what kind of feedback or what specifically we're looking for feedback about. All right. Don't just walk up to someone and say, like, what'd you think? They tell you, but it's not the feedback you needed on the thing that you wanted, right? That's not fair to them. Okay. So ask for really, like, the better you ask, the better the feedback will be. How about that? All right. And then finally, celebrate. Celebrate your courage. Celebrate your willingness to try. Celebrate the fact that you are making progress. The fact that you are putting yourself out there, that maybe whether you're getting it or not getting it yet, it's coming. And of course, look back at your notes, because that's part of the reason we keep the notes, so that you can see that progress along the way. Because it might feel like, oh, we got it. But the we got it doesn't usually happen overnight. It happens with effort. All right. So give yourself the chance to celebrate, allow yourself to do that. And when we put all these things together, this is when that growth zone, being in that growth zone, pushing ourselves, trying new things, becomes a habit. Because there is this really cool feedback, this like emotion, I always get, is it dopamine? Is it what? I always get them confused, the serotonin and the dopamine confusion. Anyway, one of those two things, or maybe both, the rush that we get back when it finally works out, like let that become addictive, right? Let that become this thing that you chase, that you enjoy, like trying something new and having it work out, and that confidence jolt that you get. And again, the confidence that you get in your team and all of the things that you can accomplish. But it starts with that willingness, or I should say that decision, to put yourself in a growth position, push yourself out of your comfort zone into your growth zone, and push yourself on a regular basis. So even maybe this week you make a goal of like every week you're going to push yourself in one new area. It could be taking a hike alone, right? It doesn't even have to be in the ring or in a trial or in training. There could be other areas in your life or in your dog life that you want to push yourself in. Just push yourself out of your comfort zone. Let that be a habit, and let that feedback that you get energize you and motivate you for the next time. All right? So that is my wish for you, my homework for you as well. And I hope you develop a habit out of this starting today. Just why not? Why not start today? And in the meantime, whatever you're doing this week with your dogs, I hope you have a fantastic time. Thanks so much for listening to the Mindset Coaching for Handlers podcast with me, Julie Bacon. I am so grateful for your precious time. Check out my Dogged Planner workbook and journal available on Amazon. Just search for Dogged Planner. I also offer monthly membership that's perfect for ongoing support of your awesome goals. Check out theqcoach.com for details, or just stop by and check out all the ways you can work on your mindset. And be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at theqcoach and let me know how it's going. Finally, please share, subscribe, and leave a review. This helps us podcasters tremendously. Plus, I know I get my best podcast recommendations from friends. Thanks, and have a great week with your dogs.